fraud landscape is not a very easy topic to breach. The bad guys are working harder to defraud us. The number one thing that is the threat to all of us is the technology. Fraud will become more and more difficult to mitigate and prevent. The more we talk about fraud from the top all the way to the bottom, need to be aware of what is out there.
Last year, 79% of organizations experienced attempted or actual fraud, and checks remain the biggest target, accounting for more than 63% of fraud cases. More than 60% of businesses also face business email compromise, where criminals send fake emails pretending to be a vendor or company leader. Ransomware attacks are also rising sharply, with year-over-year increases of more than 100%. Showing how aggressive these attacks have become. With fraud happening across checks, electronic payments, emails, and data systems, businesses are facing more risk than ever. That is why we are talking today with Nick Ferrer, Treasury Management Sales Director of Ameris Bank. Nick has more than 23 years of banking experience, including 19 years focused on Treasury Management. He is a recognized expert in fraud prevention and has led seminars, spoke at conferences, and written articles on fraud mitigating practices and the future of payments. Nick is also a U.S. Army veteran who has served as a sergeant on multiple overseas assignments and is deeply committed to mentoring our veterans in their transition to the business world. Nick, welcome. Glad to have you today.
Thank you.
You've spent more than 2 decades in Treasury Management. From your perspective, what is the biggest risk from a fraud perspective now?
Well, I think that to talk about some of the risks, we really need to understand the landscape. As technology evolves, that's a great thing, right?
Right.
But the fraudsters are also using technology to defraud us and our companies. So the number one thing that is the threat to all of us is the technology. And with the onset and the very quick rise of artificial intelligence, fraud will become more and more difficult to mitigate and prevent. It starts with technology. Once you start going into technology, then you start to realize that the fraud landscape is not a very easy topic to breach. There are numerous different types of fraud. If you look at someone who tracks all the different fraud scams that are out there, an organization like the Association of Financial Professionals, they break down hundreds of different types of scams. I try to think about it more narrowly, right? So what can we do? Number one, education is the number one thing that all subject matter experts in this field agree on. If you're looking at fraud overall, there is a trajectory of fraud doing this as the statistics. Now, if you start to look at each individual fraud scam that's out there, there are dips and increases. Why are there dips and increases? Let's take check fraud, for example, or any fraud, business email compromise, ransomware, check fraud. The bad actors will go out and deploy ransomware. So what do we all do as a community? We all focus on ransomware, right? And so once the bad guys realize that we're all focused on ransomware, they kind of shelf it and they go focus on other fraud scams. So you'll see a decline in ransomware. But that can be deceiving because it's not going away. It will come back.
And there's a cost to business, not only the fraud cost, but just the mitigation cost as well. What are some of the key items that individuals can look for in, say, email fraud?
There are different ways to attack this.
Right.
Number one, for companies that can or have the resources to deploy IT, right? That is a very good starting point. I know there's programs out there that identify emails based on domain, based on how it's spelled, based on the history of having received emails from that organization or not. There's systems out there that can tell you, you have received emails from this individual before, but this current IP address is from somewhere different.
Right.
But there's a cost to that. And I'm sensitive to some companies that can't afford those resources. So what can they do? Number one, with technology, and technology will be a theme that we keep coming back to. With technology, we have gotten very used to operating quickly. The first thing I tell everyone is slow that down. If there are any emails that come in that you don't recognize, proceed with an abundance of caution, right? If there are emails that you recognize, but they're asking you for something that's not typical of what the ask is,
Right.
question that. We need to empower in this case, our employees. We need to empower them to have a culture that they're allowed to question. There are many times when I'm interviewing people that have been victims of fraud that I'll ask them, did this not seem odd to you? And the answer is yes, but I can't go to my leaders because I don't want them to yell at me.
Yeah.
That's not a good culture, right? If you see something, if you feel something, what I tell my team, if you have that spidey sense, follow it. Never click anything in an email unless you're absolutely positive you know where that's coming from.
The most vulnerable probably are our small businesses.
Yes.
At the Chamber, 80% of our membership is made up of small businesses that may not have the resources to employ a lot of the higher tech software. So what are some things that they may be able to do to mitigate that?
It just goes back to empowering individuals at the organization to not react to emails, but to actually care about what's in the email. Years ago, I would have said that if you read an email and there's a sense of urgency that may be a little off, you need to question that. But the bad guys have caught wind of that. So now they slow play fraud, right? In the past, you would have seen, I need a wire sent right now because reasons, and the reasons are good, right? And I need it sent now, right? And so what that does is that really gets the person who's receiving that thinking there's an emergency, thinking they need to act, and so they act without really following through a good process. Today, the bad guys will say, hey, Scott, I know that in the past you've sent money here, but we're changing bank accounts. It's not going to happen this cycle, but next time you make a payment, send it here, right? That immediately puts you at, well, this isn't urgent, so it's probably not a bad guy,
right?
But it is, right? It's very much social engineering plays into it now, right? Social engineering is essentially bad guys taking advantage of our natural need or want to trust others.
Right.
And so they build up these stories in the emails that are believable. The bad guys are working harder to defraud us than we are working to prevent
that. Yep. Another thing we see a lot here, and I know our small businesses see a lot, is fake vendor requests.
Let's start really, even before we get to that question or that comment, let's start even at the top. Every organization, regardless of their size, should have a policy on what to do if there's fraud.
Right.
A lot of times when you ask a victim of an organization, the perpetrator, the person who actually sent the money or the person who was victimized, you'll ask them, did you follow your procedure? And they'll say, I don't know what my procedure is.
Yeah.
There is a procedure in place, but the associate doesn't know it. So that's first and foremost. The next thing we have to understand is that your agreement as an organization with different vendors, this should be talked about. How are you going to communicate with us? How are you going to ask us for bills?
Right.
How are you going to send us invoices? Those things need to be communicated, and it's easy today because you just tell the vendor, look, I'm trying to protect your money and our money. How are we going to do business a year from now if you change banks? How are you going to contact us? And having a level setting understanding of how the real vendor will interact with us. As soon as a bad guy is inserted into that and they're deviating from that, that should send off alarms.
Speaking of that, we have seen a significant increase in ACH payment requests. What are the red flags there, and what is the protection there?
An ACH payment is more secure than a paper payment, right? If you look at statistics, about 63% of fraud is still paper-based. ACHs are somewhere in the 30% percentile. The problem is that with ACH fraud, the reason bad guys go after that is because you have a certain window to dispute that. And outside of that window, if you're not disputing the fraud, it becomes a very difficult process to get that money back. Red flags, I would say, are the same red flags as any other situation, right? Be aware of what's being asked of you. Be aware of what you're clicking. Be aware of the situation, right? And if you're not aware, have the culture that allows the person to stop
Right.
Walk over to someone who may be aware of what needs to happen. But with ACHs, there are some solutions that banks can deploy, right? So you have things like ACH filters, ACH debit blocks. Highly encouraged to do that. But even more importantly, and unfortunately, this is a true statement, I talk to a lot of businesses that tell me, well, I look at my account once a month. Right. If you're looking at your account once a month, you're already behind.
Right.
Electronic payments via ACH, an organization that is sending ACHs, depending on the type of ACHs, so I'm putting a lot into a big bucket, so
Right.
it's directionally accurate.
Yep.
They have about 48 hours to dispute that transaction.
Okay.
Right? With a consumer ACH, they have 60 days to dispute that transaction.
Okay.
So if you're a business and you're not catching that on day one, you only have 24 hours to catch that.
If a company is requesting your information, I want to pay you via ACH, how is the best way to communicate your banking information so they can establish that ACH connection?
If you do not have a way of sending a secure email, it really starts there.
Right.
If you don't have a heavy IT infrastructure, and it doesn't have to be heavy, right? There's very economical ways of doing
Right.
that. You can deploy it that you don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. But it starts with making sure you have the right technology to ensure that your delivery of an email is good, right? Because if it's not a secure email, bad guys can just intercept that and change the information before the recipient gets it. And we've seen that happen. Secure emails are the best way. And honestly, in today's day and age, if you don't have a way to send a secure email, pick up the phone and have a conversation with someone.
Right.
Again, reintroducing that human element.
Is the legislation behind on
That's a
on catching us up?
I think that, like everything else with fraud,
Everything is moving.
It's moving so quickly. You said that, I always say, I'm not an expert at fraud simply because it moves too
Right.
quickly. I am a student of fraud,
Right.
and I continuously try to keep up with what's out there. But I promise you, what was there 2 days ago has already evolved.
Changed. What are some things we're missing here?
We have a presentation. So on the screen, you'll see that there are 12 tips that anyone can take. And this is consumer and businesses, CFOs of billion-dollar companies or CFO of a one-man shop, right? There's 12 steps. Number one, you should always be verifying and know who you're doing business with. Scott, I can't tell you how many times I get an email from a legitimate business asking a business question. I copy the email, I Google it. I copy the phone number, I Google it. I operate with an abundance of caution because I don't know you yet that well to understand all the nuances of your emails. So I'm a Google sleuth, right? I'm in there, I grab the email, I look at it. I look to see what email. I look at the business. I look at what the Better Business Bureau is saying about the entity. I Google your name. What's the internet saying about you? We all leave a digital footprint, right? What does the internet say about you? It's an interesting thing. Google your name and start to look at that, right? So you should always be verifying before anything happens, before you answer emails, right? Operate with an abundance of caution. You should familiarize yourself with how to react once a fraud incident happens. So who do you contact? Well, number one, if it's money that's been moved, the bank. Right. But immediately after, you should go to an organization like ic3.gov to report it. You should also file a police report, right? You can call the FBI, local office in Jacksonville. They have an office. They have a financial crimes division.
Right.
You can call and say, hey, I want to talk to someone about the financial crimes in the financial crimes division and give them the situation. So there are things that we can do, and there are things that, but there are 12 items that we've listed out that they don't cost anything, but they're things that everyone should deploy to make sure that their accounts are safe.
You mentioned calling the FBI, and I know sometimes we hear people are just embarrassed that they got taken.
Yeah.
Right. But it is very important that even in that case that you go ahead and report that again, so that paper trail can begin.
A lot of organizations that do not announce that they've had fraud.
Yeah.
I think that's doing the rest of the community a disservice because it could be part of a larger investigation. It could be the missing piece.
We appreciate Ameris Bank for being so proactive in this role and appreciate you coming today. So thank you.
Well, we
very much.
appreciate the partnership and anything we can do to help mitigate fraud, not just for our clients, but for our communities. We are committed to that.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Well, thank you very much.